Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, and Celine Dion could live anywhere in the world, and they all chose this small town in South Florida. Now, most people assume they came here because of the golf, or the weather, or the waterfront homes, but that's not really the reason. See, Jupiter isn't just one town, it's a collection of completely different lifestyles. You've got people living on the water who spend every weekend on their boat, families who barely leave their neighborhood, golfers who couldn't care less about the beach, and people living on acreage where you can barely even see your neighbors. By the end of this video, you're gonna know which part of Jupiter actually fits the way you wanna live. So let me get you oriented. Jupiter sits at the very northern end of Palm Beach County, right where the Loxahatchee River, the Intracoastal, and the Atlantic Ocean all come together. And if there's one thing that explains why Jupiter feels so different from the rest of South Florida, it's this. While so much of South Florida kept building taller and denser, Jupiter chose a different path. Lower buildings, more green space, more water, and a much more laid-back feel. That's a big part of why people fall in love with it. By the way, if we haven't met, I'm Jonathan Alexander with Live South Florida. My team and I have helped well over 1,000 families buy and sell homes throughout South Florida, and Jupiter is one of the places we get asked about more than almost anywhere else. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know, what everyday life is really like, the neighborhoods, the boating, the golf, the beaches, the schools, the real estate, the pros and the cons, and most importantly, who Jupiter is actually the right fit for, because here's something I've learned after helping so many people make this decision. The question usually isn't, is Jupiter a great place to live? It is. The real question is whether it's the right place for you. I had a family recently that spent weeks going back and forth between Palm Beach Gardens and Jupiter. On paper, they both checked off all the boxes, but the question that really helped them decide wasn't which town is better. It was something I ask almost every buyer. Walk me through your perfect ordinary Tuesday. Not the vacation version, the regular one. Because once you answer that question, the right town usually becomes pretty obvious. So as we're walking through this video, keep asking yourself the same thing. What does your perfect ordinary Tuesday actually look like? Because by the end of this video, you'll have a much better idea whether Jupiter is where that story happens. All right, let's jump in. Before we talk about neighborhoods and real estate, let me give you a quick lay of the land because it'll make the rest of this video a whole lot easier to follow. Jupiter sits at the very northern end of Palm Beach County. Just to the south, you've got Juno Beach and Palm Beach Gardens. West Palm Beach is about 30 minutes away. Palm Beach International Airport is usually around 30 to 40 minutes. Boca Raton is roughly 45 minutes away, depending on traffic. And Miami is close enough for a day trip, but definitely not a commute. Now, here's what really makes Jupiter different. Water is everywhere. You've got the Loxahatchee River, the Intracoastal, the Jupiter Inlet, the Atlantic Ocean, and canals running through neighborhoods all over town. That's why boating is such a big part of life here. It's also why the lighthouse has become the symbol of Jupiter. It's where people take family photos, they go for a run, or just watch the sunset. Now, as far as getting around, most people come in off I-95 using Indian Town Road. It's the main road running east and west through Jupiter. You'll also hear locals talk about Donald Ross Road, Central Boulevard, and US 1, especially if they're trying to avoid traffic. And trust me, we're coming back to Indian Town Road later because there's one thing every buyer should know before moving here. One last thing before we move on, when people say Jupiter, they're not always talking about the town of Jupiter. Sometimes they're including places like Tequesta, Jupiter Island, Juno Beach, or even parts of Palm Beach Gardens. We'll touch on some of those areas as we go, but today we're focused on Jupiter itself. Now let's talk about something you really can't see on a map. What does Jupiter actually feel like? The easiest way I can describe it is this. Jupiter is casual, really casual. You'll see people pulling up to dinner in flip-flops after a day on the boat. You'll see somebody driving a pickup truck that's worth less than the boat sitting behind it. You'll see kids riding bikes through the neighborhood while somebody else is heading out for an evening on the water. That's Jupiter. And one thing I've noticed over the years is that people here don't really feel the need to impress anybody. There are some incredibly successful people living here, professional athletes, business owners, executives, people who could just live about anywhere. But around here, people care a lot more about how you treat people than what you're driving. That's one of the biggest differences between Jupiter and some other parts of South Florida. There's also a really interesting mix of people. You've got families that have lived here for generations alongside people relocating from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Chicago, California, and just about everywhere in between. Some come for the golf, some come for the boating, some come for the schools, others simply want a slower pace of life, and and somehow it all works. But here's the biggest thing I want you to take away from this video. Jupiter isn't one lifestyle. Two people can both say they live in Jupiter and have completely different lives. One spends every weekend on the boat, another is on the golf course, another enjoys the peace and quiet of acreage, and another is raising a family in one of Jupiter's incredible neighborhoods. Same town, but just completely different lifestyles, and that's really what this video is about. Helping you figure out which version of Jupiter fits the way you actually want to live. So why do so many people keep choosing Jupiter? After helping a lot of families make this move, we've noticed a few reasons come up over and over and over again. The first one is obvious. Florida has no state income tax. And for buyers relocating from places like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, or California, that can make a huge difference. But there are plenty of places in Florida with that same advantage. So why Jupiter? For a lot of families, it's the schools. We'll dive into them later, but Jupiter consistently has some of the best public schools in Palm Beach County, and that's a huge reason families move here. Not just a water view, real boating, deep water docks, quick access to the ocean. If you're a serious boater, there aren't many places in South Florida that compare. Another thing people don't always think about until they're relocating is healthcare. Jupiter Medical Center is one of the top hospitals in the region, and for a lot of families, especially those moving with aging parents or thinking long term, having that level of healthcare nearby matters more than people realize. And then there's the lifestyle. People move here because they want a different pace. They still want great restaurants, great golf, great boating, beautiful homes, but they don't necessarily want the faster pace that comes with some other parts of South Florida. One thing we've also noticed is that people are often worried about starting over. Will we meet people? Will we fit in? Will this actually feel like home? And Jupiter does a really good job of making that transition easier. People get involved, their kids make friends, they meet neighbors, and before long it starts feeling like home. But here's where almost every Jupiter video gets it wrong. They talk about Jupiter like it's one lifestyle. It's not. There are several completely different versions of living here, and the biggest mistake buyers make is assuming they're all the same. So let's start breaking them down. Let's start with the lifestyle that probably put Jupiter on the map, the boating lifestyle. If you've ever talked to somebody who lives on the water here, you'll probably hear the same thing. I can leave my backyard and be in the ocean in about 10 minutes. And once you experience that, it completely changes what owning a boat feels like. Instead of planning your whole weekend around it, you find yourself saying, you know what, let's go out for an hour. Maybe it's a sunset cruise after work, maybe it's breakfast by boat, maybe it's heading over to the sandbar on a Saturday afternoon. It simply becomes part of everyday life. And speaking of the sandbar, if you really want to understand Jupiter, go there on a nice weekend. You'll see $1 million boats anchored next to center consoles that have been in the family for 20 years. Kids swimming, people floating, music playing, friends tying their boats together. It's one of the few places where it really doesn't matter what boat you showed up in. Everybody's there for the same reason. One thing I always tell buyers though is to be honest with yourself. We've had people tell us they have to live on the water because they're gonna use their boat every weekend. Then life gets busy, the boat sits at the dock. That happens more than you'd think. The buyers who end up happiest here are the ones who already know boating is a big part of their life, not something they're hoping it becomes. The other thing people don't realize is you don't have to own a waterfront home to enjoy the boating lifestyle. There are public boat ramps, marinas, dry storage facilities, restaurants you can pull your boat right up to. The water really belongs to everyone here. And one last thing to keep in the back of your mind, sometimes finding the right boat slip is actually harder than finding the right house, especially if you've got a larger boat. We'll come back to that when we get into real estate because it can completely change which communities make sense for you. Now, that's one version of Jupiter. Let's look at another. If boating helped put Jupiter on the map, golf is what made it famous. In fact, I'd argue that Jupiter and the surrounding area have one of the greatest collections of professional golfers anywhere in the world. You've got the Bears Club, Trump National, the Loxahatchee Club, Jonathan's Landing, Jupiter Country Club, Medalist just up the road, and of course Michael Jordan's Grove 23 isn't far away either. It's one of the biggest concentrations of world-class golf you'll find anywhere. But here's what I always tell buyers. The golf courses are incredible. That's not really the question. The question is, do you actually want your lifestyle built around golf? Because those two are very different things. The other thing people always ask me about is the famous residence. Yes, Tiger Woods lives here, Michael Jordan has a home here, Celine Dion has lived here, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Ricky Fowler, and plenty of other professional athletes and business leaders have chosen Jupiter too. But here's what's interesting. The reason they chose Jupiter isn't because everybody knows who they are, it's almost the opposite. People generally leave them alone. Privacy matters here, and that's one of the biggest reasons so many high high-profile people have chosen to call this area home. If golf or country club living is something you're considering, we also created a free Jupiter Country Club guide along with a Palm Beach County Country Club spreadsheet comparing memberships, dues, initiation fees, and community information. You'll find both linked down in the description below. But not everybody moving to Jupiter plays golf, so let's look at another side of Jupiter that doesn't require membership at all. Here's something I think surprises a lot of people. You don't need a country club membership or a waterfront home to enjoy living here. Some of the best parts of Jupiter are completely free. We've had buyers come down convinced they needed the golf membership, but then a year later, their favorite part of the week is grabbing a coffee, walking the beach, and watching the sunrise. That's Jupiter too. You've got places like Carlin Park where you'll see people walking, running, surfing, playing tennis, or spending the day at the beach. Or Jupiter Beach Park sits right by the inlet and the lighthouse. Coral Cove is one of my favorite spots if you're looking to snorkel or enjoy a quieter beach. And just a few minutes south, you've got Juno Beach and the Loggerhead Marine Life Center, where families can learn about sea turtles and during nesting season even take part in guided turtle walks. Head a little farther west and you'll find Riverbend Park with miles of trails, kayaking on the Loxahatchee River, and some of the best natural scenery in all of Palm Beach County. One thing you'll notice pretty quickly is that people here spend a lot of time outside, whether it's paddleboarding, fishing, walking the beach, taking the boat out, or catching the sunset by the lighthouse. Being outdoors is simply part of everyday life here. Now, let's talk about what's driving so many families to Jupiter: the neighborhoods, the schools, and what everyday family life actually looks like. If you ask me what's driving the most families to Jupiter right now, it's not just the weather, it's not just the beaches, it's the lifestyle. One neighborhood that comes up over and over and over again is Abacoa, and once you spend a little time there, it's easy to understand why. Kids ride their bikes to their friends' houses, families walk to dinner, parents run into each other at the park. You've got Roger Dean Stadium right in the middle of it all, where you can catch spring training, minor league baseball, and community events throughout the year. It feels like one of the few places left where people actually know their neighbors. One thing we've heard from buyers over and over and over again is they don't realize how much they wanted that until they had it. Now, the other big reason families choose Jupiter is the school. The public schools here are consistently some of the highest rated in Palm Beach County. Schools like Jerry Thomas Elementary, Limestone Creek, Lighthouse Elementary, Beacon Cove, Intermediate, Independence Middle, and Jupiter High all have excellent reputations and are a big reason families relocate here. If you're looking at private schools, you've also got excellent options like the Benjamin School, Jupiter Christian School, and the Pine School up in Hope Sound. One thing that surprises people is that many families still choose private school even though the public schools are so strong. Usually it's not because the public schools aren't good, they're looking for a different educational environment, smaller class sizes, or specific athletic and arts programs. And here's something I've noticed over the years. Buyers spend weeks talking about waterfront homes, country clubs, golf memberships, boat docks. Then 6 months after they move, the thing they're happiest about is watching their kids walk or ride their bikes to school and seeing the friends they've made. Don't underestimate how much that changes your everyday life. And that leads to one of the biggest questions every relocating family asks. Are we actually going to meet people? Because that's one of Jupiter's biggest strengths. Now, let's talk about one of the things that's changed the most over the last several years, the food scene. Jupiter has always had great waterfront restaurants, but over the last few years, its dining scene has really come into its own. If somebody asked me where to take friends or family visiting from out of town, Guanabanas and Utiki would probably be my first two recommendations. They're right on the water, uniquely Jupiter, and really capture the laid-back lifestyle that this town is known for. For date night, my wife and I love Blackbird Modern Asian. The food is excellent, the atmosphere is incredible, and it's absolutely worth the wait. Just know they don't take reservations, so get there early. If you're looking for waterfront dining, 1000 North has become one of Jupiter's signature restaurants. The Woods Jupiter at Harborside is another local favorite, and if you're looking for a great steakhouse, Jupiter Grill is one of our go-to recommendations. One thing that's really interesting is you're starting to see more nationally recognized chefs opening restaurants here. That's usually a good sign a town's dining scene is continuing to mature. But honestly, I don't think restaurants are what make Jupiter special. I think it's the community around them. There's almost always something happening here. The Seafood Festival, Irish Fest, Art Fest, Food and Wine on the River Walk, Harbor Fest, holiday events in Abacoa, and rendezvous at the light of the base of the Jupiter Lighthouse. If you're into live entertainment, you've also got the Maltz Jupiter Theater, one of the premier regional theaters in Florida. Now here's a question we hear all the time. How do people actually make friends after they move here? Honestly, most people don't meet their friends because they joined the country club. They meet them because they started showing up. The Green Market in Abacoa, community events, their kids' sports, the same coffee shops, the same local restaurants. We've seen it happen with so many relocation clients. They move here knowing nobody. A few months later, they've built a whole new group of friends. Not because they forced it, because Jupiter makes it easy to become part of the community. And I think that's one of the things people underestimate the most before they move here. So we've talked about the boating, the golf, the outdoor lifestyle, the family side of Jupiter, and the community. Now let's answer the question you're probably waiting for. What does it actually cost to live here? So now let's put everything together. If you've been watching this thinking, that's me. This is usually the point where our buyers stop asking about cities and start asking about neighborhoods. Where should you actually be looking? Let's start with the boaters. If boating is a huge part of your life, communities like Admirals Cove and Jonathan's Landing are usually where the conversation starts. Admirals Cove is the premier boating and golf community in Jupiter. Luxury homes, private docks, a marina, multiple golf courses, and some of the most impressive waterfront estates anywhere in Palm Beach County. Jonathan's Landing offers a completely different feel, a mix of condos, townhomes, and single-family homes, its own marina, and one thing buyers really like is the flexibility. Unlike some of the other clubs, memberships are optional and tiered, so you're not paying for things you may never use. One thing that's important to understand though is that if you own a larger boat, finding the right dock can sometimes be harder than finding the right house. Yeah, I said it. Now, if golf is driving your decision, your search probably starts with places like the Bears Club, Trump National, the Loxahatchee Club, Jupiter Country Club, and Jonathan's Landing. Each one offers a completely different lifestyle. Some are more private, some are more social, some require membership, others don't. If golf or country club living is your priority, we also created a free Jupiter Country Club guide along with a Palm Beach County Country Club spreadsheet that compares memberships, dues, initiation fees, and community information. You'll find both of those linked down in the description below. If you're raising a family, Abacoa is usually one of the first places we show. It's walkable, family-oriented, close to schools, parks, restaurants, and Roger Dean Stadium. Other neighborhoods we regularly show families include Egret Landing, Rialto, Sonoma Isles, and Bridgewater, as well as Prado, depending on budget and lifestyle. If you're dreaming about living near the beach, take a look at the Bluffs. If you want acreage, horses, and more privacy, well, Jupiter Farms offers a completely different lifestyle while still being surprisingly close to everything. And then you've got the ultra luxury side of Jupiter. Places like Jupiter Inlet Colony and Jupiter Island, some of the most exclusive real estate anywhere in the country. Now here's one thing we always tell buyers: don't fall in love with the house until you fall in love with the lifestyle, because the right neighborhood will make you happier than the right floor plan ever will. The other thing to keep in mind is that Jupiter is a competitive market. Great homes don't always hit the market exactly when you're ready to buy, and for waterfront buyers, details like dock size, elevation, seawall condition, and insurance can matter just as much as the house itself. Once you know which version of Jupiter fits your lifestyle, finding the right neighborhood becomes a whole lot easier. Now, before you completely fall in love with Jupiter, I do want to give you the other side of the story, because no place is perfect, and I'd much rather you hear the trade-offs from me now than discover them after you've already moved. The biggest one is traffic, specifically Indian Town Road. If you spend any amount of time in Jupiter, you'll hear people complain about it, especially during season. The state has widened parts of the road, and it's definitely helped, but it can still get backed up. That's why you'll hear locals talking about Donald Ross Road, Central Boulevard, and all the other little shortcuts they've learned over the years. Another thing you'll notice is how much Jupiter changes during season. From November through April, the population swells. Restaurants get busier, the beaches get busier, the roads get busier. Some people love the extra energy, others can't wait for May to roll around. Then you've got the summers. They're hot, they're humid, and probably warmer than most newcomers expect. The upside is the town gets quieter. The beaches are less crowded, restaurants are easier to get into, and life just slows down. One thing I'll also mention is nightlife. If you're looking for a city that's buzzing at midnight, Jupiter probably isn't the place. Most nights, things quiet down fairly early, and honestly, that's exactly why a lot of people choose to live here. Now, let's talk about cost. Jupiter has become an expensive place to live. Home prices have climbed significantly over the last several years. Insurance has become a much bigger part of every real estate conversation. And if you're buying waterfront, things like roof age, elevation, flood zones, and wind mitigation matter more than ever. The last thing I'll mention is development. If you spend any time talking with longtime locals, you'll probably hear someone say they're ruining Jupiter. The reality is Jupiter's growing, but it's also worked hard to protect what makes it special. That's why you don't see high-rise buildings everywhere. That's why so much green space has been preserved. And I think that's a big reason Jupiter still feels like Jupiter. Now, if you've made it this far, you're probably asking yourself one question: is Jupiter actually the right place for me? Let's wrap this up. Now let's compare Jupiter to its neighbors, because the reality is most buyers aren't deciding whether to move to Florida, they're deciding where in South Florida they fit best. Let's start with Palm Beach. If you love elegance, historic estates, luxury shopping, country clubs, and a more formal lifestyle, Palm Beach is hard to beat. But if you're looking for something more relaxed, more casual, and a place where flip-flops are completely normal after dinner, Jupiter starts making a lot more sense. Let's talk about Palm Beach Gardens. This is probably the comparison we make the most. They're only about 15 minutes apart and they neighbor each other, but both have great golf, excellent schools, beautiful neighborhoods, but they feel very different. Palm Beach Gardens is more polished and convenience driven. Jupiter is more connected to the water. One thing I tell buyers is this: if your perfect weekend starts with a tea time and ends with dinner at the club, then take a hard look at Palm Beach Gardens. If it starts with coffee on the dock, a boat ride through the inlet, and a few hours at the sandbar, well then you're probably gonna feel more at home in Jupiter. Remember the family I told you about earlier, the ones who couldn't decide between Palm Beach Gardens and Jupiter? On paper, they look like Palm Beach Gardens buyers, but every weekend they found themselves coming back to Jupiter. They loved the water, they loved the slower pace. Eventually, they realized they already had their answer. The lifestyle they kept choosing every weekend was already waiting for them in Jupiter, and that's exactly why we ask every buyer the same question. Walk us through your perfect ordinary Tuesday, because that answer usually points you towards the right town. Now compare Jupiter to Boca Raton. Boca has more energy, more nightlife, more shopping, more of a big city feel. Jupiter's quieter, it's more understated, more outdoors. Neither one is better, they're just built for different people. So if I had to sum it up, Palm Beach is the most elegant, Boca is the most energetic, Palm Beach Gardens is the most convenient, and Jupiter is the most laid back. Once you understand that, choosing between them becomes a whole lot easier. So where's Jupiter headed? I think it's one of the things that makes this town so exciting right now. Over the last several years, we've started seeing more investment coming into Jupiter, a new patient tower at Jupiter Medical Center, Whole Foods coming to town, new waterfront developments like Forte Lux, more nationally recognized restaurants opening their doors. Those are all signs that Jupiter continues to grow and evolve. But here's what I think is even more important. The town has done a really good job of protecting what made people fall in love with it in the first place. They're adding better healthcare, better restaurants, more shopping, more services, but they're not turning Jupiter into another high-rise city. They're protecting the green space, the waterfront, the neighborhoods, and the laid-back character that makes this place feel different from so much of South Florida. To me, that's really the story. Jupiter isn't trying to become the next Palm Beach or the next Boca, it's simply becoming a better version of itself. And if it can keep striking that balance over the next decade, I think Jupiter will continue to be one of the most desirable places to live anywhere in South Florida. So after everything we've talked about, what's the verdict? Here's what I hope you take away from this video. Jupiter isn't one place, it's a collection of completely different lifestyles that all happen to share the same zip code. Maybe you're the person whose perfect day starts on the boat, or maybe you're happiest with an early tea time and lunch at the club. Maybe you're raising a family and all you really want is great schools, kids riding their bikes through the neighborhood, and weekends at the park. Or maybe you're simply looking for a slower pace of life where people value privacy a little more than showing off. None of those are better than the others, they're just different. And that's why I don't think the question is whether Jupiter is a great place to live. I think the question is which version of Jupiter feels the most like you. Remember that question I asked you near the beginning? Walk me through your perfect ordinary Tuesday, because by now you probably have your answer. Maybe it's coffee on the dock before taking the boat out, maybe it's an early tea time, maybe it's walking the beach at sunrise, maybe it's meeting friends for dinner after watching your kids play baseball, or maybe it's simply slowing life down a little. Whatever you pictured, that's probably the version of Jupiter where you'd be happiest, and that's exactly how my team and I help people every single day. We don't try to sell people on Jupiter. We help people stop shopping for houses and start shopping for the life they actually want. Now, if you're serious about learning more about Jupiter, we've already put together 2 free resources to help. The first is our complete Jupiter living guide, where we go much deeper into the neighborhoods, schools, restaurants, parks, real estate, and what everyday life is really like. And if golf or country club living is something you're considering, we've also created a dedicated Jupiter Country Club guide that breaks down all of the major golf and country club communities throughout Jupiter. If you're watching on your TV, just scan the QR code on the screen. If you're on your phone or computer, you'll find links to both guides right down in the description below. And this is just the beginning of our Jupiter series. Over the coming weeks, we'll be releasing dedicated videos covering the best communities in Jupiter, the best golf and country club communities, and how Jupiter compares to Palm Beach Gardens and other cities throughout Palm Beach County. So if you're thinking about moving here, or you're still trying to figure out which area fits you best, make sure you subscribe and like this video, because we've got a lot more coming. And one last piece of advice, reach out before you get on the plane. not after. One conversation up front can save you months of looking in the wrong neighborhoods. Tell us what your ideal lifestyle looks like, and we will help point you towards the communities that truly fit the way you want to live. Call us, text us, email us, send us a DM on social media. My team and I do this every single day, and we would genuinely love to help. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Jonathan Alexander. This is Live South Florida, and I'll see you in the next video.